Our next guest is one of the world's savviest investors who has traveled the globe looking for good investment opportunities. He is Jim Rogers, the chairman of Rogers Holdings and the author of A Gift to My Children, A Father's Lessons for Life and Investing. Welcome, Jim. My first question is about gold hitting that historic high yesterday, and it's still hovering around that 1270 spot price today. What do you think is driving the market?
The buyers are more anxious than the sellers. Clearly, the U.S. has been giving the signal that it's going to print more money, and Japan has recently said they're going to print more money. You know, what's happening is that the money printing is starting again, and the market knows it. I'm not the only one who watches Kitco News.
Jim, you've gone on record saying that gold will probably be in a bubble one day, and there will be full-blown hysteria in 5 to 10 years in the precious metals market. But what will it take for that bubble to form?
What it will take gigantic amounts of buyers and price increases that go through the roof. I mean, you look back at previous bubbles in the last year or two of any big bubble, people just become hysterical and prices double, triple, quintuple. It's staggering what happens at the end of a bubble. Most people still have not invested in gold and silver and other things, as you probably know.
Yeah.
A few months ago, I made a speech to 300 or 400 very, very big-time international money managers from all over the world. And the moderator, I didn't know why he asked, but he said to them, how many of you have ever owned gold? 74% of the people in the room had never owned gold, much less silver or soybeans or goodness knows what else. So you can see that most people still do not own gold. For the first time in 2010, apparently central banks are going to be net buyers, but that hasn't happened since 1988. It's 22 years. And even the net buying is not going to be very much. It's going to be small.
Will we see Asian central banks buying more gold?
Everybody, during the hysterical phase, everybody will be buying. And in the interim, yes, more Asian banks are going to buy more gold. Bangladesh just bought some, last week. I mean, you're going to see more of it. It's not the way people are supposed to invest, but what they do is they see something moving and then they all want to jump on. And the more it moves, the more they want to get on. So no, the gold bull market's got a long way to go.
The European Commission proposed new rules this morning that would require increased disclosure of short selling. Do you think this will help the situation in Europe?
This will not help the Europeans. Short selling, it's been demonstrated often that short sellers are good for markets in many ways. Short selling is good for markets, and this will only make their situation worse, not better. But politicians think they have to be able to say on TV or whatever, well, we got rid of those evil short sellers. Now everything's going to be okay. It's not going to work.
You've been very critical of the government's printing money. So let's talk about solutions. How do you get out of the crisis and put liquidity back into the system?
Let people fail. I mean, that's the way it's been worked for a few hundred years. When people fail, you let them go bankrupt. You let them start over. What's supposed to happen, Daniela, when people fail, competent people come in, reorganize, take over the assets, reorganize the assets, and start over. I mean, it's a painful, horrible process, but that's the only way you're going to get it to work. What America and other countries have been doing for the past 20 years is every time a problem comes up, 25 years, problem comes up, they push it out into the future. That's why every time we have a setback these days, it gets worse. The one in 2008 was worse than the one in the previous, which was worse than the previous. Because all they're doing is pushing, they think, or they hope they're pushing things out into the future until the next election. Well, you can only do that for so long because more and more assets are rotten. Now the central bank in America is full of, its balance sheet is full of rotten assets. 3 years ago, it had $800 billion of government bonds. Now it's tripled its assets, and they're all rotten, toxic assets. Well, the next time around, it's going to be worse. So the way you solve the problem is what the Scandinavians did in the early 90s. You let people go bankrupt, you take 2 or 3 years of horrible pain, and then you start over. The Koreans did it at the end of the 90s. The Mexicans did it. The Russians. I mean, this is not the first time countries have had problems. The Japanese did it our way. In the 1990s and the 2000s, the Japanese refused to let anybody fail. And it's interesting because in the 1990s, Alan Greenspan kept telling the Japanese, don't do it that way. Let people fail, reorganize, start over. The Japanese ignored him. Well, now, of course, America's doing exactly the same thing we told the Japanese not to do. We've had one lost decade so far. I suspect we're going to have another lost decade the way things are going.
So if you could advise Obama, what would you tell him? How do you help America?
You have to cut spending extraordinarily, so painfully that he wouldn't even listen to the conversation. You have to cut taxes in a big way. You have to get rid of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, I mean, America's had 3 central banks in its history. The first 2 disappeared. This one's going to disappear too, between Mr. Greenspan and Mr. Bernanke. They keep making mistake after mistake after mistake. Well, without a central bank, the U.S. without a central bank is going to have problems. But with a central bank, we're having worse problems.
So you've mentioned let's get rid of the Fed, but what do you replace it with?
This idea that central banks know all and are all powerful and can solve all our problems has only been around for about 15 or 20 years. Actually, Greenspan, well, maybe Volcker brought that theory in, so it may be 30 years. But listen, 50 years ago, nobody knew there was a central bank in most countries, and nobody could name the head of a central bank. 50 years ago, 100 years ago, the idea that Bernanke is known by half the American population is only in recent years. This is a bubble. There's a bubble going on in central banking. Don't worry, the world can live without it.
Jim, if we could just get some quick comments from you on silver, the other metal that's really taking off these days.
Well, I own silver, I own gold, I own palladium, I own platinum, I own a lot of things. I suspect that I will make more percentage-wise in silver than I will in gold going forward, only because, gold is at an all-time high, and silver is still 60% below its all-time high. I'm not selling my gold. I'm not thinking about it. I plan to own gold for several more years.
Thanks for joining us all the way from Singapore, Jim. For Kitco News, this is Daniela Cambone. Stay tuned to kitco.com for all your precious metals information.